I've been watching you since 2014. You've helped me too many times to count. Thanks for your dedication and have a great new year. Thank you so much, Toxic Red. I also have been watching me since 2014. And it's very good to be here with you. A lot has changed. A lot has changed since 2014. It's pretty weird. What all has happened in my life, in the FPV hobby. I have to say, it hasn't gone how I expected. In 2014, 2016 timeframe, FPV was an extremely underground, extremely niche hobby. And I think that there was some hope that it would go mainstream, that we would see people flying FPV drones like we see people flying DJI drones, right? That we would see people racing FPV drones like we see people racing and driving RC cars, right? And that hasn't really played out. I think that it has turned out that the learning curve of FPV... So there are more people who are interested in driving an RC car than flying an FPV drone, for whatever reason. I think that people just are more interested in... I think there's more people that do sim car racing than do sim flying. I just think people are more interested in driving than flying. Maybe because it is a more familiar experience. Driving is something that we all... Well, not all of us, but a lot of people drive on a daily basis. And so to go and say, now I'm going to do simulated high-performance driving is a relatively comfortable step, whereas flying is a more foreign experience. I don't know if there's just something about flying that is less interesting to people than driving. But there's relatively fewer people who are interested in it. And then the technological hurdle. The knowledge hurdles, the amount of work you have to do to get into it is so high that even the people who do get into it, a lot of times they don't make it, or they just nope out. And now we have regulation. So there's ways in which FPV has gone mainstream. We see things like FPV being used to shoot commercials and FPV being used in mainstream big budget movies. We see Johnny FPV working with Porsche, and Red Bull and doing all these crazy shots. And that's cool. There are ways in which FPV has gone mainstream, but then they're not in the ways that I think we imagined it would. And meanwhile, I think there's a lot less of the sort of just free and fun, we're just going to go out to a construction site and fly around. I know that there's somebody out there is going to go, what are you talking about? Me and my friends do that all the time. It feels like that there's less of that, although maybe it's just that there's more of the other stuff. Back when there were, only 50 people who did it, then all 50 of those people went out flying on the weekend and it felt like everybody did it. And now there's 1 million people and 50 people still go out, but it just feels, I don't know, it just feels less by proportion. It just feels like the world is a lot more hostile than it was. Because when nobody knew what FPV was, and then somebody saw you flying an FPV drone, they're like, oh, cool, what's that? And now people know what FPV is, and they're like, get the fuck out of here. So it's a very, very different world. I'll say one more thing about that, though. And it's the thing I said to Bachgrinder. Bachgrinder did a video where he was, like, kind of down. I don't remember his exact sentiment, but it was basically like, FPV used to be so cool, and now it's not cool. And I said to him, I went to Burning Man for the first time in 2006. And when I went to Burning Man in 2006, there were a lot of... Burning Man's been going on since, like, I don't remember the first year, but it was certainly like the late 80s, early 90s at the very least. What year was the first Burning Man? What year was the first Burning Man? 86. So in 2006, Burning Man, 86, 96, 2006, Burning Man had been going on for 20 years. And there were people there who were saying, Burning Man's over. It's ruined. You guys missed the glory days of Burning Man. And I was like, okay, well, I'm having a great time. I had a great time in 2006. I went 2006, 2007, and 2009 and had a great time. And the whole time people were like, oh, man, if you were here in the 90s, woo! Oh, boy, it used to be so much better. Okay, 2006. I went back in 2021. Burning Man was canceled. I think it was 2021. It wasn't maybe it was 2020. Burning Man was canceled, and about 20,000 people were like, you can't cancel Burning Man. It's public land. And they just went to the playa and camped on the playa. They called it Renegade Burn. They called it a lot of things. There was no official name because there was no official organization. You just went and camped on Bureau of Land Management land and did Burning Man style stuff. And that was in 2020 or maybe 2021. And when I went there, people were like, oh man, Burning Man was so much better in the 2000s. It was so, man, it is ruined now. But back in 2006, it was so good. And I was like, that's interesting. Because I went in 2006, had a great time. People were telling me it was so good in the 90s. And my point is this. Everything you do, like the first time you do it, is going to be amazing. And then, like, when you've been doing it for 5 years or 10 years, it's going to be less amazing. That's just how human brains work. That's how dopamine, the human reward system, works. It rewards novelty. And then it attenuates how excited you feel about things as time goes on. And a lot of times people experience that, and then they think that the thing has changed, but the thing hasn't. The thing has changed, but mostly what's changed is your relationship to the thing. So Bachgrinder makes a video and he says, FPV used to be so much better and now it's kind of lame. And I'm like, you know what? The days where you thought FPV was great, the people who got into it 5 years before you were saying that you were lame and you were having a great time. And here's the beautiful thing about that. Right now, when you're sitting here going, man, FPV is lame, someone else is out there flying a drone for the first time and thinking it's the best fucking thing that ever happened to them. And so the key thing to keep in mind is that FPV isn't lame. It didn't get lame. You just got middle-aged, old, and boring. And it's okay. You can know that that happened, and you can decide, but don't shit on everybody else who's having a great time because you just got a little bored with your hobby. Yes, it changed. Some ways it changed for the worse. Some ways maybe it changed for the better. But the key thing is that the feeling that you have of it being boring, old, and lame is you, not the thing. And the best way to get around this, in my humble opinion, is to find some naive, stupid, young kid with stars in their eyes who thinks this is the best thing that ever happened. And instead of going, punk, he'll learn someday. Someday he'll figure out how dumb he looks right now and how boring this really is. You go, you're right. This is the best thing ever. And you just kind of soak it up and ride in their draft, ride in their wake. There we go. That's the word, and like let their enthusiasm rub off on you. Anyway, or, there's other things you could do, but, so anyway, thank you for inspiring that, Toxic Red. FPV is different. It's different than it was. In some ways it's better. In some ways it's lame. But the key thing to do is to find someone with fresh eyes who thinks it's amazing and then try to see what they think is amazing about it if you've lost the ability to see that for yourself.